This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
significant and protracted
political theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick. Thomas Pynchon's latest novel, Shadow Ticket, has landed on several best-of lists as we round out the year. The proto-noir is set in 1932, primarily in Wisconsin and Budapest and a few other places. And its protagonist, private detective Hicks McTaggart, finds himself tossed around two continents, caught up in the tides and riptides of the dying days of Prohibition, an international economic collapse in the Great Depression, a crumbling old world order, the rise of Nazi fascism, and spies and criminals everywhere as we get ready for World War II. So when last we talked to Pynchon scholar Sean Carswell, our professor at Cal State Channel Islands, it was about Pynchon's 1990 novel Vineland and how that book was adapted to the recent movie One Battle After Another by Paul Thomas Anderson, and particularly about the politics in the book and the movie. It's not immediately obvious, but Shadow Ticket has a lot to say about our current politics, as does most everything Pynchon writes. So it's good to get back to our official Pynchon scholar of the Political Theater podcast to discuss this. Sean, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Jason.
So the timing of this novel was so great. You know, it's like we get One Battle After Another at the end of September, and people are like freaking out because it's such a good movie, and it's also like one of the few Pynchon adaptations. And then like 2 weeks later, Shadow Ticket drops. So it was just this like moment for scholars like yourself, but also just for people who are fans, casual fans. I don't know if there are casual fans of Pynchon, and again, I was just so struck with how One Battle After Another addressed the politics that we're dealing with right now, particularly immigration, the rise of nationalism, of white nationalism. And then we got into Vineland, and it was so, amazing to me. I mean, this is old news to you, of course, because you've read it several times. But for me, it was like, wow, why didn't I read this in 1990? And it was, about the politics then. And then Shadow Ticket comes along, and you've got like the rise of fascism, the destruction of things, of the structures of society, of empires, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, just like the conversion of like America from a rural to an industrial economy at the same time that Prohibition's, about to come to. It's just, there's so much there. But let's just, before we get into the details of it, just like, you must have like had this read. I mean, you must have devoured this book if I know you and your reading habits, right?
I did. The last couple of Pynchon books, I worked to get advanced copies and do reviews of and that kind of thing. With Shadow Ticket, I didn't. I wanted just to get a new Pynchon book, just to read it like as a casual fan. It's funny that you say that because, I obviously am a scholar, but I'm also a fan, and I just wanted to read the book just to read it. So I was so excited that I was waiting for the release date. And then I just decided a few days before it was released that, well, local bookstores, like local indies, don't wait for release dates. If they have it, they sell it. So I just went to a local indie and they had it on the shelves a few days before the release date. And then the kind of typical thing when you buy a Pynchon novel is that the guy behind the counter wants to talk to you about the book and how excited he is about it too. And so it was kind of a great thing. So I was very excited about this book. I devoured it. I devoured it first as a fan, and then I liked it so much. I've read it a couple times since it came out in October. And the second time I knew I was going to be on this with you. So I thought more critically about it instead of just kind of laughing and enjoying things.
Yeah. And I feel like this, you and I think we may take for granted, like just reading, because this is our lives, our professional lives, our academic lives were centered around reading and writing and talking about it and so forth. And I feel like I missed out, on some key years of my life without Pynchon in them, which I kind of like regret now, because I feel like this could. I mean, I had other of his contemporaries, people who are in that same age frame. He's in he's 88, I think, right? Like I loved Kurt Vonnegut. I've been reading a lot of John Barth lately, his nonfiction as opposed to his fiction, though. His loosely grouped in with this like sort of postmodern author, clan, if you will. I'd read. I mean, like I think like a lot of people, I had read The Crying of Lot 49 because it's short, right?
Right.
Although it has a lot to say too. I mean, it's pretty great. It's a pretty great 120 pages.
Yeah.
But I had like
I also think it's one of his tougher books.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't recommend going into Pynchon though I went into Pynchon through Crying a Lot 49. Now that he has books like Inherent Vice and Shadow Ticket out, I would say go into Pynchon through those, or even Vineland isn't nearly as tough as Crying a Lot 49.
Well, we will do Crying of Lot 49 on another podcast. But let's talk about Shadow Ticket.
Okay.
Because it's just so good. And you're right. It is, the entry point is, it's an easy one. It's structured like a noir. The reason I called it a proto noir was that noir is really like, almost in film, at least, it specifically refers to this time period after World War II. But you see a lot of pre-noirs or proto noirs in Dashiell Hammett's work in the 20s and 30s. So I mean, it's a noir. It's a private detective novel, right? But it's so much more. It starts with Hicks McTaggart, who is a former, kind of goon for management, busting union heads in the time of labor unrest in the 20s and 30s, and now he's transitioned. He's to a more softer approach to it through a private detective agency. It's not the Pinkertons, but it's Pinkerton light, or Pinkerton-like, if you will. And he seems like a nice guy, even with his past, right? I mean, you're kind of rooting for him off the top because he's got a soft spot for, the kind of urchins in the street, and kind of knows everybody and likes jazz and likes to dance and has a soft spot for his lady and all this kind of stuff. And then he just gets caught up in this bizarre world of international cheese syndicates and heiresses of that cheese syndicate on the run, and ends up, strangely, after being kind of Mickey'd in Hungary in 1932. And the thing that is, is he's searching kind of almost like Lebowski-like, kind of haphazardly for, to fulfill his mission. He just runs into every competing interest that was scrambling for control of Europe, and in particular in European politics, whether it's Nazis, who we also meet bowling, another Lebowski thing, in Wisconsin. You've got groups of, sort of KGB type agents. You've got kind of a version of an Interpol agent. You have British intelligence agents. You have all kinds of crazy people all vying for control. And this is all happening as this old world order, particularly the Habsburg Empire, had collapsed, and before, World War II had sorted out a new world order. And it's just fascinating to me because I feel like every time we see something crazy happen here in the United States or in Europe, it's like, this has happened before. It was about roughly 100 years ago, 90 years ago. And it just seems like, for all the fun of this novel and the crazy acronyms like BAGEL, which is, and smegma and so forth, there's a lot that he's saying about what can go wrong and what can go sometimes right, as these old world orders crumble around you.
Right. And so, there's a lot in what you introduced that is kind of foundational in Pynchon studies, and I think kind of important points just for today. One is Pynchon, when he writes these historical novels, there was a scholar, well, he's still alive, but there's a scholar named Brian McHale who wrote a book called an article called Genre Poaching. And
I love it.
He argues that Pynchon utilizes the genres that were popular of the time period that he's writing about. So like in Against the Day, it's set between 1893 and 1925-ish. And so he starts out by using like boys' adventure stories and westerns and dime novels, and he kind of moves through all these different genres. And that's what Mikhail was talking about. But you can see it with the spy novels in World War II and Gravity's Rainbow. You can see it in like the Gothic romances in 18th century literature in Mason and Dixon. And so here what he's really doing is a lot of Dashiell Hammett type stuff. And one of the keys of Hammett and noir is that the detective is never a cop. He's never aligned with government, and he's always independent, So Hammett himself had been a Pinkerton, and he, according to the story, at least that's in the introduction to his collection of short stories, Nightmare Town, Hammett had been assigned to murder someone by the Pinkertons, and he wouldn't kill the guy. It was a labor leader, and Hammett was supposed to kill him, and he said no. And so he went back home to San Francisco and started writing crime stories, but always separated from any institution like a police department or or the Pinkertons.
I want to note too that Hammett was from this area that I'm currently in around DC and in Maryland, St. Mary's County, that kind of area, which is it's a very old part of Maryland, but it's also very important historically. This is where John Wilkes Booth was also from. There's a lot of context there with Hammett, and where he was here and going back to California. Sorry to interrupt. It's just fascinating.
I didn't know that about Dashiell Hammett. I knew that about James M. Cain, because Cain wrote a lot about that area, especially his later works. He has some pretty cool later. Everyone knows Cain from Postman Always Rings Twice and Double Indemnity, but some of his later stuff that's set in around the DC area is pretty fascinating. But so like for Pynchon and for Hammett, one of the big things is that you need that the detective is at odds with government. He's at odds also with corporate structures. So it's not just that he's not going to be part of a police department or an FBI. He's not going to be part of Pinkertons or some sort of corporate pseudo army. And so that's where Hicks McTaggart really lies. But and a lot of Pynchon's resistance lies in this idea that, he's essentially a capital A anarchist in his stuff. He believes in people's ability to get together and builds democratic systems that everyone can utilize together rather than having to go to a strong central government.
Pirate utopias is how William S. Burroughs defined it, right?
Yeah, but there's always this warning in Pynchon. I want to point you to one part of the book. It's when Hicks is still in Milwaukee and he's talking to his boss. And he's been approached by feds, and they want him to work for the FBI. They want him to essentially be an informant, and he doesn't want to do it. And his boss says to him, "Of course they're trying to turn you back to what you never stopped being. They know all there is to know about you, more than you ever knew. You think you're reformed now, not just a normal tough guy, but a saintly one." And there's this sense that once you are a strikebreaker, once you are a thug, you always are. Mm-hmm. And for everything that he's doing to change that, there's still the fascist in him, Yeah. And another scholar referred to a passage from Gilles Deleuze about within us all is a molecular fascist. But there are small fascist impulses in all of us, and this is what Hicks is fighting throughout the whole book. I think it's an important thing for today, because when you listen to a lot of folks who are anti the fascist turn in our federal government, a lot of the talk is to respond in an equally authoritarian measure. And there's a danger there too. You don't want to replace one fascist institution with a different authoritarian institution. You don't want to, right. It's the authoritarianism we need to take down, not necessarily left or right of it.
Yeah. I feel like jumping into like our contemporary politics, like it has become one sort of series of retributions on the other side after another, one battle after another, if you will. and that is the thing that's so insidious about that, is that it's really difficult to get out of it, to get out of the cycle, because when January 6th happened, federal government prosecuted, the people who broke into the Capitol and assaulted, like members and law enforcement and people. And, first thing that the current president did was pardon all of them, every person on that. And, and that, and then there's this continuing cycle of like, we're going to go after people that went after us. And it's just like, how do you get out of that cycle? How do you do the right thing so that we can function as a society? But how do you also get out of the cycle of retribution, which is not clear? There's no answer, at least I think from there's no easy answer right now that's available. Because it's you can we're shaping up into this into an election, and in the coming year, and it's just like already the party out of power, the Democrats are like, we have to fire everybody up, we have to get people angry and understand what the stakes are, and it just like it leads to this like this furthering of this sort of martial metaphor of politics, as opposed to it being like, how do we get a decent sewer system? It becomes
Right.
how do we make the other side pay for what they've done?
Right. Well, because it's easier to make people angry than happy. I mean,
Yes.
you can see that just driving down the freeway, you shoot someone a bird and they're angry, but like try to drive down the freeway and make someone happy. I mean, like,
Well, especially where
yeah,
you're from, in
what are you
California.
waving at, asshole? Yeah. So I mean, the work that needs to be done is the hard work of rebuilding a society, which also takes us back to 1932, which is the year of the book, because 1932 is a significant year. It's the year that the Nazi Party is moving for power in the Parliament of Germany, and it's also the year that Hoover is running for re-election against a guy named Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so you have two world powers going in two different directions. And as far as like Congress and stuff, that's your field. I can't really speak to it. I can't answer what on a congressional level you can do, but I can answer on a Pynchon level the way he talks about building societies and communities. The answer would probably be what we can do now is work locally the way that you see the characters at the end working. And I should probably say this. I don't think there's such a thing as a spoiler in a Pynchon novel, because nothing runs on plot. Nothing hinges on plot. So
Right.
I'm going to talk equally about the end of the book as I am the beginning, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, it's been out for a couple months now, and also it's not the key part. The way the book ends is not the small sort of Quentin Tarantino alternate history twist of it is not the point of the book. So it's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But so what we see at the end of the book is, for instance, you have Ace Lomax, who has been part of taking over Jewish property after Jews have to flee different parts of Europe, and then selling that property. And he turns and he becomes someone working to help Jews get to safety. Now, I just said that we all have the molecular fascists, but the idea is to fight that, and that's what Ace Lomax is doing. He's fighting the impulse to scapegoat people, and he's decided to use his time to help people. And you see, Hicks has done the same thing. I mean, on the one hand, you could say he's a bumbling detective. I think he's intentionally so. Like, he doesn't want to find the cheese heiress. He doesn't want to make her go back home. He wants to respect her autonomy, and he wants to get paid while he's doing it, because why not? It's her family's shitty. Take their money, and so I mean, to me, he seems like an intentionally bumbling detective, which I respect. And I mean, I think there's a real power that um, everyone who works for a boss in the U.S. can understand, which is that you don't have to align with your boss, especially when their goals are nefarious. You can slow things down. You can always be a grit in the gears rather than oil in it. You know what I mean?
The character in literature that Lomax and McTaggart kind of remind me of in terms of the way that they're not stumbling because they're actually both really good at their jobs. They're not like
Yeah.
bumbling, kind of around, and that's where they depart. I think from Lebowski is that he really didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a good person. That was his superpower. But it was the good soldier Švec, in Czech literature, which is this, he's this person who is a soldier who decides in the Habsburg. I think it's at that point it's still the Habsburg Empire or the Prussian. I forget exactly, which it's been a long time. But Švec decides to fulfill every order to the T, to the point where it's actually inefficient.
Mhm.
And he becomes this inefficient soldier that helps bring about the collapse of the empire. Simply
Wow.
by being like so in tune to it, working through the system, and not like trying to take it down, but just like using the system in a way that the system wasn't may have not intended, but is he doesn't really break a lot of rules, but he
Yeah.
just drives everybody so crazy. It's great. He's a great character.
He sounds like the university administration where I work. Here's another form. Make sure you fill
Yeah,
it out. No. Uh,
it's better than triplicate. It's quadruplicate.
um, so there's something else that you said that maybe I'll ask you the question if you don't mind this time is
Please. Yeah.
you said that we've seen all this before, like we have historical examples, and this is a big part of the conversation of the current administration is we have seen this kind of pathway toward totalitarianism before. We've seen very deliberate acts like attacking universities, scapegoating one part of the population, um, developing a kind of an extra legal mechanism, like your own personal police force that doesn't obey standing laws, using the military for political purposes, um, all the other steps in the totalitarian playbook. I mean, those are the
Right.
four that came off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And this
Timothy
is
Snyder
happening.
Light. Yeah.
What's that?
Timothy Snyder Light.
Oh, right,
The
right, sure, yeah.
right.
And so when you look at this book, do you see history repeating itself today, or is that the way you're reading Pynchon's depiction of 1932?
The way it's not like space for space. I mean, I think there are some big differences. One is that there isn't really another um, kind of competing world order. I mean, I don't think of China, as like competing with us in a way. They've just gone their own direction without us. Like they're like, oh, you're not going to build solar panels. Cool. We'll do that all. We'll do all that. You're not going to do, like, electric cars. Great. We'll corner the market on it. Like we're not like competing with them as much. And I'm not to say, I know that China, is not like this, remarkably tuned gear where everything is wonderful. They have a lot of problems economically, with and certainly governmentally. But I don't see that in the same way that I see like the way Germany and Russia and and uh, and Britain were co-equal power structures as the United States. And so I think that that's a key difference. But the thing, if anything, I see more parallels to the United States in the collapse of the Habsburgs, because it was so the Austro-Hungarian Empire was so big. It had its tentacles in almost everything, and was competing with a couple of other empires in the area, the Prussians and the Ottomans. But the structure, the class structure, the military structure, the civil society, the collapse was so complete in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and people didn't have anything to replace it with, which is what made fascism, particularly in Germany, so attractive. It's like everything is completely fucked up right now. The economy is in tatters. Like the culture is in grievance mode and so forth. And here's an answer, and it's like right off the shelf. And there's a charismatic leader. And so I do see that there is a parallel there where when I think we're dealing with a crisis in our own government where the Congress does less and less. The courts, are very diverse until you get to the Supreme Court, and then it's a very predictable, outset. I mean, like the 6 Republican-appointed justices, for the most part, rule with this administration and with Republican administrations and against Democratic administrations, beat for beat. And we're seeing this particularly in the week that we're recording this, the 2 big high profile cases the Supreme Court heard. I mean, you could have, it was like they were playing their partisan parts, but not like as an independent branch of government. So there is just this, like, it's like unclear what comes next. But one thing that, in the 1932, fascism like provided that answer, for a lot of people. And in the United States, we went a different direction, although in some ways, the only way Roosevelt could get a lot of the New Deal passed was by adopting some authoritarian impulses himself, threatening to expand the Supreme Court when he didn't get his way. It's I would much rather have been on the path of the United States in the 30s, even with the fault, than in Europe. But I think that's where I see it, is that we're particularly in Washington, for people who are used to, like, okay, here's the structure of the New World Order since World War II. It's in crisis. Like the Europeans are trying to figure out how they resolve the Ukraine-Russia war without us. Whereas we used to be the lead on that. And I just feel like we're in this state of flux where nobody knows who's really in the driver's seat. And, the current president, Donald Trump, can change things on a dime with a tweet or a Truth Social, post, leaving everybody to say, like, okay, now he's mad at Putin. Now he's mad at Zelensky. like, whereas, the debate in like Europe this week has been like, how much can Zelensky give, to like make peace happen that gets the Russians out of Ukraine, but also where he retains his own, government and self-determination of the government. I don't know. It's just, I feel like I'm rambling. I apologize. Like, but I feel like that's it. It's like we don't know what comes next. We're in a thing where there's so many people competing, and then there's one really attractive alternative for a lot of people.
And so what you're talking about is, to a lesser extent, what I'm hearing. A lot of folks feel like this is already predetermined. Like, we've seen this before. We know how this movie ends, but we've seen similar things, and we don't know how this movie ends. And I think your discussion of us not knowing is a little bit more. And this is one of the strong parts of the book, is 1932 went a couple of ways. It went to fascism and it went to the New Deal. These are 2 choices. They're not the only 2, but they're 2 pretty good choices. Yeah, I mean, there will have to be a little bit of, I mean, you're going to have to break down structures, and you'll have to do that with force, not violent force, but like what you said about Roosevelt threatening to add to the Supreme Court. I mean, you don't have to threaten to add. It seems like you have pretty solid bribery cases against a couple of those justices, and that could be enough. And that's not even authoritarian. That's just enforcing the law. But
I guess it depends who's enforcing the law, though, right?
yeah. Law's not supposed to apply to rich people. But can I give you the most kind of direct passage from Pynchon to today's? And we talked about this
Please.
before, so you know it's coming. But at one point in the book, the Interpol agent is talking about hunting down the Al Capone of cheese, and first off, if you think about like a cheesy gangster, we can already start to think of contemporary equivalents to this cheesy gangster. And here's how the Interpol agent describes him. He says, "And yet each trap I set for him, some he could not even have been aware of, he has always, through some perverse turn of fortune, managed to evade. I can't show my face around the director without some idiot sniggering about criminal genius as if Airmont is another Dr. Mabuse or Fu Manchu. Can you appreciate how infuriating, how insulting to me personally to be mentioned in the same breath with this feeble impersonation of a crime boss? To waste my talent not on an evil genius, but on an evil moron, dangerous not for his intellect, what there may be of it, but for the powers that his ill-deserved wealth allows him to exert, which his admirers pretend is will, though it never amounts to more than the stubbornness of a child."
Gee, who could who could Pynchon possibly have been thinking of as a model for this?
Yeah, and before Trump became a political figure, Pynchon made fun of him too. He made fun of him in Bleeding Edge for being a contractor who always stiffed his subcontractors. Which, I mean, I wish the working class would think a little bit more about that, about Trump. But here's also part of where the historical determinism kind of falls, because if we think about Trump as a Franco or a Mussolini or a Hitler, because he certainly is following their pathways. Even if we think about him as an Orban or the guy in Turkey whose name I know but I don't know how to pronounce, Erdogan.
Erdogan. Yeah.
Okay, or even Putin. The difference between Trump and all of those figures is that Trump is 79, and he's pretty clearly in some serious cognitive decline, or he's just really that dumb. I don't know which one it is, but he's one of the two. He's certainly no evil genius, and he's certainly not charismatic enough and young enough to have a real run at this. And so then you ask yourself, well, who is the heir apparent? And one of the reasons Trump is able to maintain this power that he has is people still see him as a reality TV star. Whenever he's becomes unpopular, he just puts on another show of The Apprentice, but he calls it a cabinet meeting. You know, I mean, so because we're so used to he's a reality star, he's supposed to be a spectacle, he's supposed to be ridiculous, we're just supposed to watch and laugh at him without recognizing how he's damaging us. You would need another reality star to fill that in. And there's not another reality star with the same shtick. So it would be really difficult to find that heir apparent.
Yeah, I think so, and I think this is where like the system, you know, of like what is set up, what is damaged. You know, if you damage the political system, if you damage Congress enough, if you damage the courts enough, if you get rid of, you know, the bureaucracy, bureaucracy has always gotten a bad rap, but like it also, you know, makes sure that like planes don't drop out of the sky, you know, and it does do some things that we just take for granted. So if you disrupt all that and you kind of level it, then I mean, when Trump leaves the stage eventually, you know, there may be they might not need a reality TV star, you know, to take the reins, because there's a system in place where it's like, well, we can just declare an emergency and like go around Congress and impose tariffs, and this is like a lot of what the Supreme Court's docket is what he's doing legal? You know, can he just impose tariffs by saying there's a national emergency? Does he have the authority to do that? Can he fire anybody he wants from the Federal Trade Commission, from the Federal Reserve? You know, can he just say, I don't like the way these congressional lines are drawn. let's get rid of all the Democrats in Indiana. And so that's I think where this again departs from 1932. Our current society departs in 1932 is it's not as stark a choice, and it's not clear. I don't think that there's anybody nearly as charismatic in the Republican Party to match Trump. But what comes after that, especially if you have a rather feckless minority party that doesn't also seem particularly well suited to the task. Now they did have some success, with a couple of gubernatorial elections last month, and the two candidates, two women who ran and won in New Jersey and Virginia, did it by emphasizing like, hey, everything costs too much, and everything is unpredictable and screwed up, and my administration is going to be about competence and making sure that your electricity bill isn't so high, or that we actually build roads that we say we're going to build instead of just talking about how beautiful they are. So it's early, but I'm a worrier. What do you know?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's real things to fear. Um, One of the things I like about the book is, Hicks goes to Hungary and we know how it ends for him. But we also don't know how it ends for us. We know how it ended very differently in the US. And that's another thing that I got to thinking about. When we draw parallels, one thing that I've thought about a lot, because um, most of my family, and not just my parents and my brother, but a lot of my extended family, uncles, aunts, they're all Trump supporters. And as he does things like um, sends ICE out to just terrorize Latinos, and I think we need to stop acting like he's going after immigrants when so many of the people he's getting are not immigrants or undocumented, when so many of them are not undocumented. What he's doing is he's making a scapegoat out of Latinos, and that's the way we probably should be talking about it. But so much of my family supports that, and then at the same time, I'm teaching at a university that is surrounded by factory farms, where my students are the children of farm workers, and I think maybe 60% of our student body identifies as Hispanic. So I always wonder, like, what was it like in Germany in the 30s when when the Nazis are coming up, and like your family are Nazis, and you don't align with them, but like you still love your family. What do you do in these situations? And it's always a good question, and I think that kind of comes out in the one scene when Hicks goes to Milwaukee and he ends up at a Nazi bowling tournament, because what you see is in 1932, Nazism is just an idea.
Right.
It's just it. We don't know that the Holocaust is coming. We don't know that a world war is coming. It's just a belief system, and you can take it comically or not that seriously. But like, where are we in this scenario? And how close are some of these Republicans at this point, and how close are some of the MAGAs at this point to Nazis? And that's something I don't really have an answer to, but I think this book raises a question pretty well.
And I think this, where I think one of the biggest, more, differences there in political movements is also that, MAGA is pretty vague, beyond where Trump is at the center of it. I mean, like it's hard to disagree with, if you buy into the, like, we should have a great country, or we should make it great again. Like that's kind of where the analysis stops about how to do that and where to do that. So it seems to be less of a belief system and more of a grouping, a grouping of people where, there are some who are, support abortion rights and some who don't. And there are some who support gay rights and some who don't. I mean, it's not nearly as coherent as, say, like the moral majority, right? Was in the late 70s and early 80s, when that became a force in Republican politics. Or even, like this is a very small group among Democrats, but like the Code Pink, groups of the anti-war groups among Democrats in the early 2000s that sort of came up in the wake of 9/11 and the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. So it's less, and I think that MAGA is basically kind of a rebranded Republican Party where it's this amalgamation of interests, which is what all political parties are. We are ill served by only having two, I think, in our society. Whereas, because it's just kind of like Walmart versus Target, at this point.
Yeah.
Where there's so much. They're both are so big that there's no way that they can actually coherently represent the vast majority of people in them, which I think is why you see some bleeding, like where, the approval rating for the president is in the 30s, high 30s, low 40s. And in the Republican Party, it's in the 80s. So we may be heading, who knows, to a kind of society where we have like a third Democrats, a third, Republicans, and a third everybody else. And because there is no alternative to those two, people are like, they used to be just register with a party, whether it was because of who their parents were or because they had a union affiliation or because they were in the military or whatever. But, that's where their friends or that's where their colleagues or their family registered. But now they're like, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't need, like in California, I don't need to belong to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party in order to vote in a primary election because of the way that the elections are structured there. So, and you see this, like not to let the Democrats off the hook here either. The Democrats keep on saying like, oh, we're going to have this line of attack to convince the American people that they should put us back in charge again. And it's like, I mean, read the post-election interviews with Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat who won the Virginia governorship, or Mikey Sherrill, who won the New Jersey. It's like, it's about costs. it's about like how expensive everything is. And as if we needed to be reminded too, like, Zoran Mamdani, the New York City mayor-elect, this is an avowed, socialist who talked almost incessantly about the price of everything and bringing down costs and so forth. And it must have really thrown, Republicans, particularly Republican campaign strategists, to see him in the Oval Office and having Trump kind of touch him and paw him, like affectionately, because Trump likes one thing, above all, and that's winners. People who are cool and win, or, like at the Kennedy Center honors, like who got honored at the Kennedy Center? The bands he listens to, the movies he watched, Sylvester Stallone, Kiss, George Strait. These are he likes people who have authority and win and have followings, and that's the playbook. It's pretty simple. Like most people just don't want to be bothered with politics. Actually, they want to like live their lives and not have it cost an arm and a leg.
Yeah. It was also, that's what Hitler won on. It was cost. That's when the Weimar Republic had that massive inflation, and we'll get rid of inflation. We'll just kill the Jews. But the problem also that the Republican Party has now is the inflation is on them. It's their policies, it's their inflation. I don't know how to solve national politics. I do like to keep going back to Pynchon because that's what I know. But where Pynchon always brings it back is to local. It's always back to building communities. And when I say he's a capital A anarchist, I mean that's kind of the beauty of that early 20th century anarchism. It was always a sense of we have agency as people. And we can do things as people. We can only do small things, which is the opposite of fascism. You do small things. So like, what I see in Pynchon, the answer to a lot of these questions is not, well, we're going to solve the national government and the Supreme Court. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to get into a city hall. And we're going to build a road. We're going to put together a not-for-profit, and we're going to create our own, I don't know, magazine or our own
Like
news
a punk rock
program.
magazine?
Yeah. See, there you go. That's how I Pynchoned myself into life. But
Actually, this is a good. This is an interesting transition to our word of the week, because I feel like the antidote to it is exactly what you're talking about. So I want to pivot to that, and also, like, I realize that I've taken up a lot of your time today. We'll keep this discussion thread going, but I think it fits right into it. The word of the week is hyperreality. HYPERREALITY, hyperreality. And that's in postmodern philosophy. Hyperreality is a condition in which the distinction between reality and simulated representations becomes blurred, making it difficult to distinguish between the two. It's coined by the French sociologist Jean Baudrillard. I think that, this happens a lot in Pynchon, where you're like, particularly in this novel, it's like, wait, are they really teleporting things around in Budapest? like you're like, wait, is that fake? Is that real? Wait, what's this golem thing? Like, that's like a weird, like, Jewish construct of a made, artificial person, but this is like a robot with machine guns for arms. Like, it's just the hyper reality definitely applies to Pynchon. And also, as we're entering, another stage of AI, I think with Sora, with images, with things like that, it'd be AI is making it more and more difficult for just casual people to distinguish between reality and bullshit and constructs. But I think where I picked up on this, and the reason I pivoted to it, was that doing those things, like tending to your garden, if you will. Like doing something for your neighbor, like building a little free library in your front yard where people can exchange knowledge, like volunteering for the local libraries, like literacy, like camp or whatever. Those are things that are real, not hyper real. Like there's nothing fake about like engaging in that. And that to me is like the antidote of like getting so pissed about what's going on in national politics and feeling this rage and this impotence, if you will, about there's nothing, you can do about the fact that the East Wing of the White House was destroyed. But you can, like help your neighbor build their own fence.
Right, exactly. And when Baudrillard's writing about that, a lot of what he's talking about is by the 1980s, almost all of our experiences had been mediated. We're understanding the world through TV, through magazines, but this is the time when, the sociologist, I forget his name, but started thinking about writing Bowling Alone, where people stopped joining clubs.
Robert Putnam,
people stopped going out and engaging with people on a real level. And then now hyper reality has become even more hyper, as tech companies have mediated almost all of our experience. Pornography mediates sex. Facebook mediates friendship. The things that once seemed like they had to be face to face no longer have to be face to face. And so, the counter to that is walk out the door. Keep your phone in your pocket. Say hello to someone.
Leave your phone at home.
How are you going to find your way anywhere anymore? You think people know the names of streets? I don't even know the name of the street I live on, Jason. No, I'm joking, obviously, but yeah. This becomes a challenge, and there's mediated and mediated. This is a mediated conversation we're having. It's mediated through what Zencaster. But it's also, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, and we're exchanging words in real time. That's, for me and you, that's less mediated. For everyone listening, though, this is a mediated thing. So they need to stop listening to your podcast, Jason. Go out and make.
live speech that I'll give later on, or a media or a discussion that you and I will have, like a Lincoln Douglas debate, like in Freedom Plaza or whatever we call it now. So
No, but the real answer would be to tell your friend well, I'm not trying to pitch your podcast, but to tell your friend about it. Hey, listen to this, and then you get together and talk about it, which is kind of the only way I listen to podcasts. Is like I'll listen to this because you do it. But like if a friend says, "Oh, you have to listen to this," then I'll listen to it and then talk to my friend about it. It's always. Podcasts can be a great way of countering hyperreality.
And I feel like there is one reason for sort of optimism, if you will, is that we are starting, I think, to see some backlash against just everything being on social media, everything being mediated through screens and so forth. Return to office, which was so controversial for a couple of years there, seemed like people now seem to be yearning to be around other people.
Yeah.
Younger people are reading actual physical books. They want to go to the movies. They want to see music live. Again, it's like great, if they think it's their idea, awesome. Like just get them, to see that band, or whatever. Because it's like, yeah, it's better. It's better that way. So.
And it's not just young people. I still play in a punk band. And like we do shows, and I did a show in Phoenix back in January, and a friend of mine from the NAU days, I don't know if you ever knew Danny Clark, he came out to the show with me, and he said, I think the exact same people are here who were here when we were seeing shows in Phoenix in the 90s. And there probably was. There's probably overlap, but I love it that I can play in a punk band and a bunch of 50-year-olds come out to the show. I mean, why not, man?
Where did you play? But just Phoenix being my hometown too. Just
it was an illegal place. It was like a biker club.
Oh, nice.
So like it's like
Pynchon-esque already,
Yeah. Like you had to, they had a bar, but you couldn't pay cash. You had to donate money, and then they give you tickets for donating money to their charity, and then you could use your tickets to get a beer. It was like,
so it's like buying pot now in a lot of places.
Well,
you make a donation to the Museum of Cannabis,
Good for them for having a club. They're not bowling alone.
That's true. And also, I just wanted to note, for those of you who can see us, you can see the ukulele in Sean's background. And if you read any Pynchon novel, I'm starting to realize there's just a lot of ukuleles.
I wrote an academic article on Pynchon's ukulele and what it means. It ran in the Journal of America, or the American Journal of Pop Culture. Oh shit! I should know what it ran. But it ran 12 years ago.
An entire book of short stories about ukuleles and authors. So
I did that too. Yeah. Little obsessed with the instrument.
Well, I still have the baritone ukulele that you gifted me several years back. I think in 2008 or 9 or something like that. So I need to get it restrung.
Right on. Yeah.
And I need to get it restrung. And the case you gave it me too, that has the shaved ice stickers and razor cake stickers and so forth. So
right on.
It's about the only instrument that I can even passably play. So
I'm glad you can play it.
I learned to play, well, not much. I learned to play the bass lines of the Treme, the beginning of Treme, the show on HBO. I don't know, boom, 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 boom. Anyway, Sean, thank you so much. Let's talk soon about which Pynchon novel we will do next for the next political theater adventure into Pynchon land. Maybe not Crying of Lot 49. Maybe we save that for another time. But I'll and definitely not Gravity's Rainbow. That would probably need to be the last one we do.
Yeah.
So, but we'll talk about that. But in the meantime, happy holidays. Glad you're free from the students for a couple of weeks at least as the holidays begin there. And, we'll see you another time.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. And just in case any of my students listen, I don't want to be free of them. It's the rest of the university I want to be free of.
Gotcha.
I love the kids, man. The students are the best part. But yeah, thanks for having me, Jason.
Of course, it's always a pleasure.